Hey guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series. This is Buxton Peak Book 1, Who is Ian Taylor? And we are going to be reading Chapter 9 next. When we left off the last time, Megan and Ian's mom, Claire, were sitting on the sofa talking about Ian, and they just watched him on Access Hollywood. And this next chapter, Chapter 9, is called The Babysitter. Really, Mom? Ian leaned over Megan's shoulder. You're showing her naked baby pictures of me in the bathtub? Is that really necessary? Ian, you're home! Claire jumped up and ran around the sofa to hug her son. He took the brief opportunity to lean down and brush his lips against Megan's before his mother tackled him. I haven't seen you since last summer. How are you? You've lost weight. They're not feeding you enough. I'm going to have a talk with that agent of yours. He promised me he was going to take good care of you. All the time his mom was jabbering on, Ian couldn't take his eyes off Megan. It had only been a few weeks, but it was too much. He didn't want to be away from her for a second more. He ignored his mother's chastisements, and his fingers reached across the back of the sofa until they connected with Megan's. He laced his fingers through hers and held on so that nothing his mom could do could pull them apart. She didn't even seem to notice. Megan's hazel eyes seemed to pierce him, and her hair was like chocolate silk falling across her shoulders. It felt as if Ian restrained every bit of willpower he had not to fall into her arms and stay there forever. I missed you. His whisper was probably not even audible, but Ian could tell Megan knew exactly what he'd said. Although her nod was barely perceptible, the soft smile and brief shrug of her shoulders told him everything he needed to know. I like your baby pictures, Megan whispered. She still had the open photo album draped across her lap. You're not supposed to be looking at me naked until we're married. She closed the book and raised her eyebrows suggestively. Her crooked little smirk teased him, and he felt a frustrated rumble in the back of his throat. Finally, his mom seemed to pick up on the cue that there was a separate conversation occurring behind her back. She shook her head, grinned, and stepped away. Ian never let go of Megan's hand as he dismissively ignored his mom and slowly made his way around the sofa until he was in front of Megan. He lifted her to stand before him and wrapped her completely in his arms, clinging to her with every inch of his upper body. He buried his face in her hair, allowing her natural scent to lull him into a near trance. She seemed to feel it too, because she laid her head on his chest and almost melted into his arms. He held her as time and space fell away and nothing else in the world mattered. Ian, what room do you want me in? Kai's intrusive voice broke the spell and dragged Ian back to reality. He slowly pulled himself away from Megan, looked up at his friend standing in the doorway to the living room, and almost growled at him. The one across from mine, like usual. Obviously, Ian added in his head. The girls' stuff is in there, Kai said. I put you in the room down the hall, Claire told him. Here, I'll show you. They left the room, and Ian pushed Megan out of the way, panic causing his heart to race. Her wide, innocent eyes didn't calm his nerves. You're sleeping in the room across from mine? Yeah, Megan hesitated. Why is that a problem? It's too close. Ian's whisper trailed off as he stumbled away from her. He leaned against the sofa and felt like his ribs were caving in. He pressed his hand to his chest, feeling his heart race. Ian, you're kind of scaring me. What's going on? He didn't answer her, but rushed from the room and took the stairs 2 at a time until he reached the landing and staggered down the hall. He felt almost as Gary sometimes looked when he had too much to drink. He pushed the door open to the room across from his as if he didn't believe it. There was the evidence. 2 suitcases, makeup, hairspray, a curling iron, a bra hanging over the back of the chair. He slammed the door shut and pressed his back against it, closing his eyes and willing his breathing to slow. I have stood on a stage in front of screaming fans, singing to a sold-out stadium. I've pushed through crowds of girls trying to rip my clothes off. I've had my photograph taken with thousands of women. I have been asked to sign autographs on body parts that shouldn't be exposed on a beach. I can handle one woman in the bedroom across from mine, one incredibly beautiful, tempting, haunting, voluptuous, gorgeous woman who I love more than life itself. Ian? Ah! Ian jumped when Megan snuck up beside him. He scrambled away from her. They were alone in the nearly dark hallway, standing in front of the door to his bedroom on one side and hers on the other. He left his startled girlfriend standing there as he raced down the hallway to where Kai was unpacking and Rhonda was leaning against the doorframe talking with him. "Where's my mom?" "She said she was going down to make dinner." Ian didn't wait for Rhonda to finish her sentence before the panic crushing his chest propelled him back down the hall, and he nearly fell down the stairs in his attempt to get away. He raced to the kitchen where his mom had just begun preparing the evening meal. "Mom, what were you thinking with these sleeping arrangements?" Ian asked. "I'm not comfortable having her across the hall from my bedroom. We've never been alone together. I don't trust myself around her. What am I supposed to do?" It had only been a few minutes since Ian had arrived at the estate, and he couldn't get his head straight. All he could think about was the fact that Megan and Rhonda had practically moved into the extra bedroom, and that was way too close to his. Kai had his own room down the hall, so Ian would be all alone once everyone else went to bed for the night. It was too much temptation not to knock on Megan's door. "Ian, you're going to have to learn to be your own chaperones. It's part of growing up." Claire turned around to the sink where she was rinsing vegetables. Hang on just a second. "I don't know how. I've never really been alone myself. I went from living at home to serving on my mission, where I always had a companion, to the constant companionship of my mates, and now Ed follows me everywhere. Once we're married, I'll be with Megan." He looked out the window without seeing the beautiful garden, his blank stare brought on by the panic in his chest. "Maybe it's time for you to get away for a while." Claire finished rinsing the sliced vegetables, set them aside in a colander, and turned to her son. "That would be nearly impossible. I'm not leaving you all during the holidays. Then we'll be heading off on a European tour, and then I'm going to want to go back to America to be with Megan again. I'll be missing her so badly by then I won't be able to stay away. I love her so much, Mom. I desperately want to be married, not just because I'm attracted to her physically. I love her. I want to be with her for eternity." "Then why wait?" Claire asked. She shrugged her shoulders and raised her eyebrows. "Honestly, what are you waiting for?" Ian just stared at his mother. Sudden clarity came into his mind. Why wait? So they'd be apart while he was on tour and she was finishing college. But they would be anyway. What's the difference? They would have all of Christmas break for a honeymoon, and then it would be just as if he was away in the service or something. People did it all the time. There was no reason to wait. I wonder if Megan's parents have passports. Ian jumped up from the kitchen island where he had been sitting, watching his mom cook, and ran from the room. Hang on, let's get some water. Claire chuckled at her son's naivety, knowing that it was going to take some paperwork and preparation to pull something together quickly. She abandoned cutting vegetables and went to her home office to get on the computer. She couldn't help him get through the emotions of the situation, but at least she could get on the embassy website and see if she could help him with the technical aspects. Now this is back to Ian talking to Megan. The Preston Temple is only an hour and a half from here. Ian paused to breathe once he sat down on the sofa. He took both of Megan's hands in his. We could stay at this secluded resort up in Mailer. The Ribble Valley is beautiful. We'd have a couple of weeks for a honeymoon. Your next semester doesn't start until January, right? He was talking so fast Megan couldn't keep up. Megan was trying to reconcile in her brain how 7 months ago she'd never heard of Ian Taylor, and now she was suddenly about to marry an international celebrity. She couldn't decide if it was happening too fast or not fast enough. Her conversation with Rhonda on the plane came rushing back into her mind, how she had suggested that they were getting too close physically when claiming they wanted to live chaste lives until marriage, and how that was hypocritical. Still, it was all happening so quickly. "We barely know each other," she said. "I just found out a few weeks ago you were leading this double life. I don't even know that side of you." Megan wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or convince Ian. "What if I don't like the person you are without the charade?" "Look me in the eyes, Megan." She thought he was going to say something else, challenging her about whether or not she would ever stop liking him. But he didn't. He just stared into her eyes, longing to communicate something. She didn't know what that something was, and then suddenly she did. He was her eternal companion, and he knew it, and she knew it, and they'd known each other forever, and they were going to love each other forever. Without releasing her gaze, he slowly lowered himself to his knees right in front of her and held her hands in his. His whisper was sincere and intense, and it brought tears to her eyes in a way she'd never felt before. "I love you, and I will for eternity. Marry me, please." Megan hesitated for barely a moment, then nodded her head and let the tears run down her face, feeling as happy and as loved as she'd ever felt in her life. As far as she was concerned, they could leave for the temple right this minute. She didn't care if cameras followed her every day for the rest of her life, as long as he would be by her side. She wanted every part of him, body and soul, rock star and missionary, sappy songwriter and vagabond who traveled the world having fun with his mates. She wanted it all, and by some stroke of luck from heaven, he wanted her too. She threw herself into his arms, knocking him over, and they laid on the floor of his mother's living room, crying, laughing, kissing, hugging, and finally just lying there enjoying the moment. It could have been hours later or just a few moments when Claire walked into the room and found them that way, looking almost as if they were asleep. She cleared her throat to get their attention, and they looked up at her sheepishly. "No wonder you guys need a chaperone." Claire shook her head playfully and clucked her tongue. "You can't keep your hands off each other." "You can't say I didn't warn you about that, Mum." Ian pulled Megan tighter into his arms and smiled up at his mom. He didn't seem apologetic, more that he didn't care anymore what anyone else thought. "Well, you're not going to like what I have to say." Claire hesitated. Megan and Ian unwrapped themselves from one another and sat up. Megan sensed there was something serious coming. "You can't get married in England any time soon." Megan looked at Ian, and her disappointment was reflected right back in his eyes. "It could take weeks or possibly months to get all the paperwork around." Claire sighed as she sat down on the sofa near them. "I'm really sorry." Her voice caught at the end, and the sorrow in her eyes told Megan how much she had grown to love her future daughter-in-law over the past 3 days they'd spent together. Megan sat dumbfounded for a few minutes, realizing all their plans had been shattered. Suddenly, she looked up at Ian with an idea. "Come to Michigan. I'm pretty sure it's easy to get married in Michigan, even if you're a foreigner. I think all you need is your birth certificate and your signature on the application. I had some friends a few years ago who did that. There was a 3-day waiting period, I think, but that was it. The Detroit Temple is just down the road from my parents' house." "That's an amazing idea." Ian grabbed her in a passionate kiss, and Megan wrapped herself right into his arms. "Still sitting right here." Claire reached down and put one hand on Megan's shoulder and one on Ian's. Megan broke apart from her future groom and sheepishly grinned up at his mom. "Megan, go call your parents and have them make arrangements at the Detroit Temple, and I'll go book some flights back across the pond." Claire paused and looked over at her son. "Ian, go find your father and tell him to dig out our passports and get us packed. We're leaving immediately. I am too old to be your babysitter." And that's the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called The Talk. And we'll get to that next time. Have a good night.